when a Texas mother facing deportation under Trump's new efficiency mandate tearfully told a local reporter, "It's like we're invisible." She never imagined Jenna Jameson's response would be an Instagram post so convincingly styled as Melania Trump that it forced a direct statement from the president himself. The post dropped at 7:02 p.m. Pacific Time. By 7:15 p.m., the internet was broken. It wasn't just the uncanny resemblance, the precise tilt of the head, the soft focus lighting, the signature gaze of distant contemplation. "Yit" was the caption. 6 simple words beneath the portrait. "Some things are not for sale." Within minutes, phone screens in newsrooms from New York to Los Angeles lit up with push alerts. On cable news, anchors who were mid-sentence on a segment about tariffs abruptly stopped, squinting at the image being fed into their earpieces. In the White House, the junior press staff scrambled, their panicked messages rocketing up a chain of command that was, at that moment, completely unprepared for a war it didn't even know had been declared. A few days before the internet broke, Elena Rosales sat at her small kitchen table in a Houston suburb, staring at a single sheet of government letterhead. The paper felt heavy, important. It was from the Department of Homeland Security, but the language was new, stamped with the insignia of the president's American efficiency mandate. It wasn't a court summons or a legal filing filled with complex language. It was worse. It was a notice. Simple, direct, and utterly devastating. It informed her that due to a comprehensive review of long-term residency permits, her status was being terminated. She had 30 days to arrange for her voluntary departure from the United States. 30 days to dismantle a life she had spent 22 years building. Elena had arrived when she was 19, a student with a visa who worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. She met her husband, a third-generation American citizen, while serving him coffee. They fell in love, got married, and had a son, Mateo. Her husband had started the paperwork for her citizenship, a long and arduous process, but he died in a workplace accident before it was finalized. The legal case became a tangled mess of bureaucracy and loss, leaving her in a state of permanent residency that had always felt secure, if not complete. She paid taxes. She volunteered at Mateo's school. She was the manager of a local diner, a place where the regulars knew her by name. She was, in every sense of the word, an American. The piece of paper on her table told her she was not. Her son, 10-year-old Mateo, walked into the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He saw the letter and the look on his mother's face. He'd been seeing that look a lot lately. "Is that another one from the government, Mom?" he asked, his voice small. Elena forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing, mijo. Just grown-up stuff. How was school?" She had tried everything. She called the number on the form, navigating an automated phone tree that led to a pre-recorded message explaining that the efficiency mandate was designed to reduce administrative backlogs and streamline national resources. There was no option to speak to a human being. She went to a local immigration assistance charity, a small, underfunded office where a kind but exhausted caseworker looked at her letter and sighed. "We're seeing hundreds of these," the woman, whose name was Delia, said. "It's not the old system. There's no appeal process listed. It's a final notice. They're targeting cases that have been open for years, no matter the reason. They're just closing the files." "But my son is a citizen," Elena had pleaded, her voice cracking. "This is his home. This is my home." Delia's eyes were full of pity. "I know. We can file a petition for discretionary review, but honestly, Elena, with this new mandate, we haven't had a single one granted." Desperate, Elena did the one thing she never thought she would do. She called the local news. A young, ambitious reporter named Chloe Bevan saw the potential for a powerful human interest story. She came to the house with a cameraman and interviewed Elena in her living room, surrounded by photos of her late husband and Mateo's school awards. Elena spoke with quiet dignity, explaining her situation, her love for her community, her fear for her son's future. Towards the end of the interview, Chloe asked, What do you want to say to the people in Washington who made this decision?" Elena looked directly into the camera, her composure finally breaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "I just want them to see us, to know that we are not just a file number or a statistic in their new plan. We are people. We are your neighbors. We have families. But it's like we're invisible." The story aired on the local 6 o'clock news. It was a poignant, 2-minute segment that drew a handful of sympathetic calls to the station. And then, it vanished into the vast ocean of the 24-hour news cycle. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump was having a very good week. The American efficiency mandate was his signature domestic achievement of his second term. In a boisterous press conference in the Rose Garden, he lauded the policy's success. "We are cutting the fat like nobody has ever cut the fat," he proclaimed, gesturing emphatically. "For years, bloated government bureaucracy has been a swamp of waste and inefficiency. We're getting rid of it. We've closed hundreds of thousands of backlogged cases. The system is running clean. It's running beautiful. It's another promise made, another promise kept." A reporter from a mainstream network raised his hand. "Mr. President, there are reports of individuals, including some with U.S. citizen children, who are being issued termination notices without a clear path for appeal. Critics are calling it a form of stealth deportation." Trump scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "That's fake news. It's nonsense. These are people who have been gaming the system for decades. Decades! We are simply enforcing the law in an efficient manner. It's about fairness to the millions of people who do it the right way. We are making America strong and lean. The complainers are always going to complain. It's what they do." He radiated an aura of untouchable confidence, a man convinced of his own narrative, deaf to the whispers of dissent from places like Houston, Texas. Hundreds of miles away, in a quiet, minimalist home in Hawaii, Jenna Jameson was scrolling through her phone. Her life was a world away from the chaos of both Washington and Houston. She ran her businesses, managed her media presence, and mostly enjoyed a life of private luxury. She wasn't a political junkie, but she kept up. She saw the headlines about the efficiency mandate, but they were abstract, political noise. Then, a friend from Texas sent her a link. "You have to see this," the text read. "It's heartbreaking." Jenna tapped the link, and the local news segment began to play. She saw Elena Rosales' kitchen, so familiar and normal. She saw the family photos, and then she saw Elena's face as she spoke those final words. "It's like we're invisible." The word hung in the air. Invisible. Something inside Jenna snapped. It wasn't a calculated political thought. It was a gut reaction. A deep, primal anger that bypassed her brain and went straight to her core. She had spent a lifetime fighting to be seen, for good or for ill. She had built a brand, an empire, on the very concept of visibility. The idea of a woman, a mother, being erased by a piece of paper, by a confident president's signature on a bill designed for efficiency, struck her as the most profound injustice she could imagine. For a moment, she thought about doing what other celebrities did. She could tweet her support, write a check to a charity, maybe post a link to a GoFundMe. But she knew what would happen. It would be a blip, a momentary signal of virtue that would change nothing. The machine was too big. Trump's confidence was a fortress. To get his attention, you couldn't just knock on the door. You had to smash a window. You had to do something so jarring, so unexpected, that it couldn't be ignored. She looked at her own face in the reflection of the dark phone screen. Then she thought of the current First Lady, Melania Trump, a woman of immense visibility, but one who often projected an image of quiet, almost melancholic, distance. A public figure whose face was a canvas onto which millions projected their own ideas. An idea began to form. A wild, audacious, and incredibly risky idea. It was a plan that could blow up in her face, brand her a fool, and earn her the ire of the most powerful man in the world. But it was also the only thing she could think of that might work. She stood up and walked to her closet. She didn't call a publicist or a manager. She called her longtime makeup artist, a man named Julian who was a genius with facial contours and lighting. "Julian," she said, her voice low and steady, "I need you. I have a photo shoot. It's the most important one I've ever done, and nobody can know about it until it's finished." 2 days later, the trap was set. The photo was ready. It was a masterpiece of mimicry. Julian had softened her features, used subtle contouring to reshape her jawline, and styled her hair in Melania's signature wave. The lighting was diffused and elegant, mimicking the official portraits from the White House. Jenna herself had studied hours of footage, perfecting the exact expression, a blend of stoicism, elegance, and a hint of something unsaid. She wore a simple, high-necked blouse in a cream color, almost identical to one the First Lady had been photographed in. She sat with the photo open on her laptop for almost an hour, her finger hovering over the post button. She thought about Elena Rosales. She thought about her 10-year-old son, Mateo. And she thought about the word invisible. Then she wrote the caption, "Some things are not for sale." She attached the photo and hit share. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos. Her phone began to vibrate so intensely on the table that it sounded like a swarm of angry bees. Her follower count ticked upwards at a dizzying rate. The image was being screenshotted and reposted across every platform. At first, the comments were filled with confusion. Is that Melania? Did the First Lady's account get hacked? Wait, that's Jenna Jameson? No way. Then came the wave of understanding, and with it, the explosion. Political commentators, celebrities, journalists, and ordinary people all began to weigh in. The juxtaposition was too powerful to ignore. Jenna Jameson, a woman who had built a career on explicit self-exposure, flawlessly impersonating the most famously private First Lady in modern history. The caption was the masterstroke. It was vague enough to be deniable, yet specific enough in its context to be a direct missile aimed at the heart of the Trump administration. Was she talking about dignity? A mother's love? A person's right to their home? Yes, all of it. The gambit worked faster and more effectively than she could have ever imagined. The image wasn't just a viral post. It was a cultural event. It transcended political bubbles. People who loathed Trump admired the audacity. People who supported him were confused and defensive. It forced everyone to ask the same question. Why? The why was Elena Rosales. But for the first 12 hours, the world didn't know it. Jenna remained completely silent. She didn't answer her phone. She didn't reply to a single message. She let the mystery build, let the pressure cooker hiss, knowing that the silence itself was a weapon. The image and its 6-word caption were doing all the talking. They were a direct challenge to the president's narrative of untouchable success. And now, the White House would have to respond. Inside the West Wing, the mood was one of controlled pandemonium. The president's chief of staff, a grizzled political operative named Marcus Thorne, had advised ignoring the post entirely. "It's a trap, sir," he'd argued in the Oval Office. "She wants you to engage. It gives her oxygen. If we stay silent, it's just a weird photo that dies in 48 hours. But the president saw it differently. To him, it wasn't a political maneuver. It was a personal insult. It was mockery. The image, in its flawless imitation, felt like a violation. It was using his wife's face, his family's image, against him. The silence was eating him alive. He watched the cable news chyrons, the endless loop of the photo, the smirking pundits debating its meaning. He saw it as weakness to not respond. "They're laughing at us, Marcus," Trump had said, his voice tight with anger. "They're laughing. We hit back. We always hit back." And so, against all strategic advice, the decision was made. The president would address it at the afternoon press briefing. The White House press secretary, a woman who had perfected the art of the political non-answer, was visibly relieved to cede the podium. She knew a storm was coming,
and she was happy to not be the one holding the lightning rod.
The James S. Brady press briefing room was packed. The energy was electric. Every reporter there knew this was the main event. After a few perfunctory questions about foreign trade, a veteran journalist from Reuters, a man named Alastair Finch, stood up. "Mr. President," Alastair began, his tone respectful but firm. "Over the last 24 hours, a photograph posted by the media personality Jenna Jameson, in which she appears to be styled as the First Lady, has been viewed hundreds of millions of times. The White House has been silent. Do you or the First Lady have a comment on this portrayal?" Trump stepped up to the podium, a grim smile on his face. He had been waiting for this. "Thank you for the question, Alastair. I do have a comment. I think it's a disgrace. A total disgrace. You have a person, someone with no class, trying to get attention. It's sad, really. Very sad." Alastair remained standing, refusing to yield the floor. "A follow-up, if I may, sir." The photograph was posted with the caption, "Some things are not for sale." Many have linked this to a local news story out of Houston about a woman named Elena Rosales, who is facing deportation under your efficiency mandate. That story has now resurfaced and gone national because of this photo. Is it the position of your administration that a mother being separated from her American-born child is an acceptable part of achieving government efficiency? The room went silent. The trap had been sprung. The question perfectly linked the viral spectacle to the substantive policy, forcing the president to address them both. This was the moment of truth. A different leader might have pivoted, expressing sympathy for the family while defending the policy. But Donald Trump heard only the first part of the question. He heard Jenna Jameson's name. The personal insult eclipsed the political danger. His face hardened. He pointed a finger at Alastair. "That is a nasty, nasty question. And I'm going to tell you what this is really about. It's not about some person in Houston nobody ever heard of. It's about a cheap stunt from a D-list celebrity. A porn star. That's what she is. And she's doing a cheap stunt to get famous again, because her career is over. It's pathetic. We're talking about serious issues here, about making our country strong, and the fake news media is obsessed with a pathetic publicity stunt. She's a nobody, and that's all I have to say about that." He turned and walked away from the podium, ignoring the flurry of other questions being shouted. He had delivered his counterpunch. In his mind, he had won. He had defined her, dismissed her, and put her back in her box. And in Hawaii, Jenna Jameson watched the TV screen, her expression unreadable. She sat perfectly still as the President of the United States belittled her on the world stage. She listened as he called her a D-list celebrity, a nobody. She heard the derision in his voice when he spat the word porn star. She watched him completely, utterly ignore the name Elena Rosales. When the broadcast cut back to a stunned panel of analysts, Jenna calmly picked up her phone. Staff. She sent a single text to her small, trusted team, now. An hour later, a new notification pinged on millions of phones. Jenna Jameson is live on Instagram. The view count skyrocketed. 100,000. 500,000. It crested over 1 million and kept climbing. But the person on the screen was not the glamorous, enigmatic figure from the photograph. It was just Jenna. She was makeup-free, wearing a simple gray t-shirt. She sat in a plainly lit room, no props, no effects. She looked directly into the camera, her gaze steady. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice calm and clear. "A lot of you are probably here because of a photo I posted. And a lot more of you are probably here because of what the President of the United States said about me today." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "First, let's clear something up. Yes, that was me in the photo. It was an artistic statement, and I stand by it. The President called me a D-list celebrity. He's not wrong. He called me a porn star. He's not wrong about that either. I own my past. I built my own business from the ground up, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. He called me a nobody, but he's wrong about that.
Because today, I'm not here to talk about me.
Her demeanor shifted. The defensive posture vanished, replaced by a focused intensity. I'm here to talk about a woman the president said nobody has ever heard of. I want you to hear her name. Her name is Elena Rosales. With a tap on her screen, the view shifted. She played the entire, unedited local news segment. For 2 minutes, her million-plus viewers watched Elena Rosales tell her story. They saw her living room. They saw her son, and they heard her voice crack as she said, "It's like we're invisible." When the clip ended, Jenna's face was back on screen. Her eyes were glistening. "Invisible," she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. "That's what this is about. President Trump said I did this for attention. He's absolutely right. I did it for Elena's attention. And for the attention of every other family like hers. I used the only currency this culture seems to value, celebrity and controversy, to buy a spotlight. A spotlight for a story that was being ignored because the person at its center wasn't famous or powerful." She leaned closer to the camera. "The president called my stunt cheap. But what's truly cheap is a government that balances its budget on the backs of mothers and children. What's truly cheap is a system that can erase a person's entire life with a form letter and no appeal. What's truly cheap is a leader who is more offended by a photograph than by the suffering of his own people." This was the moment. The winning move. President Trump dismissed me as a nobody with no class. But I learned something from building my businesses. When you see a problem, you don't just complain about it, you solve it. So I've decided to do just that. The attention this photo has generated has been overwhelming. And I've decided to put it to use. As of this morning, I have officially filed the paperwork for a new nonprofit organization. It's called the Visibility Foundation. Its mission is simple: to provide legal resources and public advocacy for families who have been unjustly targeted by bureaucratic overreach. To make the invisible visible. The president can keep his insults. I'll keep the receipt. Because all the attention, all the clicks, all the articles from the last 24 hours, I used them to seed the foundation with its first $500,000. And this morning, the Visibility Foundation retained the services of one of the top immigration law firms in the country. Their first client is Elena Rosales, and their next 10 clients are other families from her district who received the exact same letter. Their cases are being filed tomorrow. She looked directly into the lens, her gaze unwavering. "So yes, Mr. President, it was a stunt. It was a stunt to pay for the best lawyers in the country to fight your administration in court. It was a stunt to make sure the world knows the name Elena Rosales. You can call me whatever names you want, but from now on, when you come for them, you're coming for me too, and you'll find that this nobody has a voice, and she has friends." She ended the live stream. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, her phone, which she'd set to silent, began to light up with a fury that dwarfed the initial explosion. The war had been won. The news cycle detonated. Trump's D-list celebrity insult, played side by side with Jenna's calm, powerful response, became the defining clip of the year. The narrative was no longer about a weird photo. It was about David and Goliath. It was about a woman who had weaponized her own controversial past to defend the powerless. The story of Elena Rosales was now the lead item on every national news broadcast. News vans, once absent, were now parked in a line down her quiet suburban street. The small charity office that had been her last hope was now fielding calls from national donors and civil rights organizations offering their support. For Jenna, the victory was immediate and overwhelming, but the cost began to settle in as the adrenaline faded. That night, she finally sat down, the exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. She scrolled through her messages. For every 100 notes of praise, there was one dripping with a unique and terrifying venom. "You think you're so smart. We know where you live. You're a traitor to this country. You and all the illegals you protect should be sent back to where you came from. I hope someone does to your family what you're doing to America." The messages were filled with misspellings, violent imagery, and a rage that felt deeply personal. They posted her address. They posted photos of her home downloaded from real estate sites. They posted threats against her partner, Lior, and their children. Lior found her hours later, sitting in the dark, the phone glowing in her lap. He gently took it from her hand and set it aside. "You need to stop reading those," he said softly. "I can't," she whispered, her voice raw. "I feel like I have to see it, to know what I've unleashed." "What you've unleashed is hope for a lot of people, Jenna," he said, sitting beside her. But his own voice was strained with worry. "But was it worth this? Look at what these people are saying. They're fanatics. They're not just disagreeing with you. They want to hurt you. They want to hurt us." Jenna leaned her head against his shoulder, the weight of the last few days pressing down on her. She felt the fear coiling in her stomach. It was one thing to fight a political battle on TV and social media. It was another to see your home, your family's sanctuary, threatened by an army of anonymous avatars filled with hate. "They were invisible, Lior," she said, her voice barely audible. "If I have to take this so they can be seen, then yes, it was worth it. But God, I'm scared." She was the woman who had just checkmated the President of the United States, but in the quiet dark of her home, she felt as vulnerable as anyone. The public victory was monumental, but the private cost was a debt that was only just beginning to come due. The week that followed was a blur of fractures and alliances. The national conversation split cleanly down the middle. On one side, Jenna was hailed as a genius strategist, a modern-day folk hero who had brilliantly used the system's own pathologies against it. On the other, she was a traitor, a disgrace, a symbol of everything wrong with a fame-obsessed culture, a narrative amplified daily by the president's most loyal media surrogates. The fight was loud and vicious, but it was also stuck. It had become just another partisan battle in a nation defined by them. The stalemate broke from the most unexpected direction possible. It came in the form of a weekly column by Beatrice Cromwell, a titan of conservative thought. Beatrice was a formidable intellectual, known for her scathing critiques of modern liberalism and her unwavering belief in traditional values. Her readers expected a takedown of Jenna Jameson of epic proportions. The column, published in a leading conservative journal, started just as they'd hoped. The spectacle of a former pornographic actress appointing herself the moral arbiter of our nation's immigration policy is, to put it mildly, grotesque, Beatrice wrote. Miss Jameson's entire career has been a monument to the very cultural degradation that conservatives have spent half a century fighting. Her methods are vulgar, her platform is unearned, and her sudden sanctimony is difficult to stomach. But then, the column took a shocking turn, and yet, Beatrice continued, the vulgarity of the messenger cannot be allowed to obscure the danger of the message she is opposing. The American efficiency mandate is not a conservative policy. It is a technocratic one. It is the sterile, bloodless dream of a central planner, not the wisdom of a constitutional republic. A government that grants itself the power to dissolve a family. A unit that predates and supersedes the state by administrative fiat, without due process or appeal, is a government that has forgotten its limits. This is not strength. It is the brute force of an entity that has grown too large and too arrogant. The column was a thunderclap. President Trump is correct to want to streamline government, she argued. He is dangerously wrong to believe efficiency is a higher value than justice. We, as conservatives, cannot cheer for the erosion of due process, simply because we approve of the short-term targets. What happens when the targets of such efficiency are our own businesses, our own churches, our own families? A citizen using her own private resources to defend another citizen from the overreach of the state is not a stunt. It is the most fundamental American act of all. We may find Ms. Jameson's persona distasteful, but we must find the state's unchecked power terrifying. Beatrice Cromwell had done the unthinkable. She had defended the principle by separating it from the personality. Her column gave cover to countless conservatives who were privately uneasy with the mandate, but unwilling to be seen as siding with a porn star against their president. The debate was instantly reframed. It was no longer Trump versus Jameson. It was now the state versus the family. With the public narrative irrevocably shifted, Jenna knew she had one final move to make. The goal wasn't to win another news cycle, but
but to solidify the victory into something lasting. She agreed to a single, exclusive interview, not with a friendly host on a liberal network, but with Alastair Finch, the Reuters journalist who had asked the pivotal question at the White House press briefing.
They met in a neutral studio. No frills, just 2 chairs and a camera. Jenna was poised, calm, and serious. Alastair began by asking her if she was surprised by the fallout. "No," Jenna said simply. "I knew it would be explosive." What surprised me, and what moved me, was how many people understood what was really at stake. People like Beatrice Cromwell, who I'm sure disagrees with me on almost everything, understood that this isn't about left or right. It's about the difference between a government that serves its people and a government that processes them like paperwork. Alastair leaned forward. "The president and his supporters still maintain this was all for your own personal gain, to revitalize your career. What do you say to that?" Jenna smiled, a faint, knowing smile. "My career is fine, but that's not the point. The most valuable thing I own isn't my money or my fame, it's my name. For a long time, that name has been associated with a lot of things. Controversy, shock, business. But I decided I wanted it to stand for something more. This was never about being for or against one president. It was about being for families, and against the idea that a human life can be dismissed for administrative convenience." She looked into the camera, not as an entertainer or a provocateur, but as a founder outlining a mission. "The Visibility Foundation will be here long after this news cycle is over, and long after President Trump has left office. It will be a permanent, nonpartisan resource for any American family who finds themselves staring at a piece of paper that threatens to erase their world. We will provide the best legal minds to fight for them. We will use our platform to tell their stories. We will not let them be invisible. That is the principle I fought for, and it's a principle I'm prepared to dedicate the rest of my life to defending." Her statement was quiet, resolute, and final. She had taken their biggest weapons, her name, her past, her fame, and reforged them into a shield for others. The battle was over. The lasting echo was just beginning. 3 weeks later, in a small community center in Phoenix, Arizona, a young organizer named Kendrick Washington was at his wit's end. For months, he had been trying to help the Garcia family. Their story was nearly identical to Elena Rosales'. Mr. Garcia had been brought to the U.S. as a child, had lived in Phoenix for 30 years, married a U.S. citizen, and had 2 American-born teenage daughters. His final citizenship application had been stalled for years in bureaucratic limbo. Then, the letter from the efficiency mandate arrived. 30 days. Kendrick had tried everything. He'd called his congressman's office. He'd filed petitions. He'd pleaded with local officials. No one would help. The mandate was federal. Their hands were tied. He felt utterly hopeless. Then he saw the Jenna Jameson story. He watched the news reports, the press conference, and her Instagram lives. He didn't have 1 million followers, or $500,000. But he realized Jenna's true weapon wasn't her money. It was the playbook. It was the simple, brilliant act of refusing to be ignored. A new energy coursed through him. The next morning, he met with the Garcia family. "I have an idea," he said. "It's a little different, but I think it might work." He didn't try to create a viral photo. He did something much simpler. He made 4 signs out of cardboard. On each one, he wrote in thick black marker, "We are not invisible." The following Monday, Mr. and Mrs. Garcia and their 2 daughters walked to the front of Phoenix City Hall and sat down on the steps, holding their signs. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They just sat, silently, from 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. The first day, a few people stared. The second day, a local blogger took a photo and posted it online with the hashtag Visibility Foundation. The third day, a local news crew showed up. Kendrick, acting as their spokesman, didn't talk about complex immigration law. He talked about his neighbors. He talked about high school bake sales
and Sunday barbecues. He told the story of a family woven into the fabric of his city. By the end of the week, the silent protest on the steps of City Hall was the biggest story in Phoenix. The mayor, facing pressure from her own constituents, held a press conference. She announced she was personally calling the regional DHS director to demand a stay of the Garcia family's deportation. The public pressure was too much to ignore. 2 days later, the family received a new letter. Their case was being deferred, pending a full judicial review. They were safe. That evening, Kendrick sat on his porch, scrolling through his phone. He stopped on a photo a friend had sent him. It was of the Garcia family, standing on the same steps where they had protested, holding a new, handmade sign. It just said, "Thank you." He looked at their smiling, tear-streaked faces and realized the profound truth of what had happened.
Jenna Jameson hadn't saved the Garcia family. She had just reminded a young organizer in Arizona that he could. She had passed the torch, and in small pockets of hope all across the country, the Invisibles were learning, one by one, how to finally be seen. What does it truly mean for a government to be efficient? And what is the cost when that efficiency comes at the expense of human dignity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories that challenge the powerful, make sure to subscribe.